Dew gathered like tiny lanterns on the grass when Arush slipped his hands into a pair of sky-blue gloves. The gloves were a gift from his mother, soft as clouds and stitched with a thin silver thread that caught the morning light. The neighborhood was just waking up. A milk truck hummed. A sparrow tapped its beak against a tin gutter as if starting a tiny drum solo. The world smelled of wet earth and boiled tea and hope. Arush set a ball on the patchy lawn behind his apartment building. The laundry line sagged low, 3 wooden clothespins hanging like sleepy bats. He squinted, measuring it as his crossbar. He took 3 steps back, 3 forward, then hopped lightly the way he'd seen the older keepers do. When the ball rolled, he met it with the inside of his right foot, crisp and tidy, and then trapped it again with the underside of his sneaker. The ball stopped obediently, like a puppy pleased to have found its person. "Your gloves look like 2 pieces of sky," called his neighbor Sana, peering over the fence. "Are they magic?" "They remind me to look up," Arush answered with a grin. "Sometimes I forget that the sky is as big as my dreams." "Big talk," she teased, flicking her braid. "I'll shoot." "You save." Sana sent the ball skipping across the lawn. Arush shuffled, knees soft, arms out, light as a dandelion seed. He blocked one, then another, palms firm, fingers like tiny bridges guiding the ball to safety. When Sana faked left and tapped right, he laughed, chased the ball, and cleared it with a clean pass that trickled under the laundry line. "You're not like other goalkeepers," Sana said. "You run around like a midfielder." "I don't want to wait for the storm," he said, breathing little white clouds in the cool air. "I want to watch the sky and meet the wind halfway." It was a sentence that would follow him for years, like a favorite melody. Riverlight Park, Coach Lenz noticed him. Coach Lenz had a voice old as a tree trunk and a whistle that lived around his neck as if it were his second heart. He watched from the sideline while Arush played a neighborhood match, barely old enough for the youth team but already captain of the back lawn. When the ball spilled loose in midfield, Arush sprinted out of his goal, timed his steps, and swept it away with the gentleness of someone brushing crumbs from a table, then sent a pass that curved like a ribbon to Sana's feet. She scored, and the neighborhood got louder than the sparrows. "Who taught you to do that?" Coach Lenz asked afterward, squinting with a kind smile. "Do what?" "To play with your whole heart, not just your hands." "My father says a keeper is like a lighthouse," Arush said, taking off one glove. "A lighthouse can't just wait. Must look, listen, shine, warn, and guide." Coach Lenz nodded. "Do you want to train with Riverlight SC?" Arush felt something bright flutter inside him, like the first pages of a brand new book. "Yes," he said, and the word tasted like lemon and sugar. Training was a garden of new habits. Cones crowded the grass like tiny colored mushrooms. Arush learned to shuffle sideways, toes whispering across the earth. He learned to call to his defenders not with panic but with music. "Mahir, left shoulder." "Nia, space behind you." He learned to catch the ball so it kissed his palms and stayed, the way a secret sits inside a quiet heart. He learned to read too, not just books, although he devoured those, but the shape of a game. He read the way shoulders turned and knees bent, the way a striker's toes pointed, the way the ball hummed when it was struck with love, and the way it coughed when it was struck in fear. He learned when to sprint and when to wait. He learned to make decisions quickly, but never with hurry in his chest. Riverlight SC's first team wore blue, a blue so deep it looked like evening. Their stadium, Harbor Lane, smelled of popcorn and paint and faith. One autumn evening, when the sun sat low like a juicy orange, Coach Lenz pulled Arush aside. "You're starting," he said simply. The locker room listened. Every shoe, every bench, every drop of water leaned closer. Arush swallowed and thought of his laundry line and the sparrows. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, as Coach had taught him. In the tunnel, he reached out and touched the brick wall, rough and real, as if to remind himself that this story was happening on a planet, not on a cloud. The match began with a whistle that sounded like a silver fish slicing the ocean. Riverlight's rivals arrived wearing crimson, their fans singing in one long, braided voice. Early on, a forward broke free. Arush saw the space before anyone else did. He sprinted, feet thudding softly on the grass, and met the ball halfway. Calm touch, tidy pass across the ground, out of danger. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. "Is he a keeper?" someone whispered. "Or a midfielder who lost his way?" He was both, in his own way. He was a sweeper of lines, a keeper of breaths, an elf in a forest of legs. He lifted his head and talked his team forward. The blue shirts passed with trust, and when the crimson arrived again, Arush step. Pet out early, scooping the ball like it was a loaf of warm bread he'd rescued from falling. The match ended in a draw and a different kind of victory. After a while, Riverlight's fans started chanting a new song, Arush's name strung on a rope of laughter. The years passed in seasons stitched together by practice and rain. Arush became the captain of Riverlight's first team. He stirred hot cocoa on silent winter mornings, hands wrapped around the cup as steam rose in slow white flags. He jogged laps around the stadium on misty evenings, the floodlights painting silver moons on the ground. He listened to his teammates, really listened, so he could speak in a way that felt like a hand on a shoulder, not a finger pointing. Blue Harbor, his Riverlight, reached a continental semifinal one spring so full of birdsong it felt like a festival. Their bus rolled through streets strung with flags, and children ran alongside, waving and clapping. Riverlight won a domestic cup, and a photo of Arush kissing the trophy looked as if he were kissing a metal sunflower. His style grew bolder and softer all at once. Defenders trusted him, knowing that if they stepped high, he would be there to sweep and soothe. Midfielders loved him, because he could pass through a press with the care of someone untangling a necklace. Strikers respected him, because every save he made was clean, with no unnecessary roar, no thunder where a breeze would do. Then came the call that shook the air like the tremble after a bell. Crimson City wanted him. Crimson City, with their mountain of titles and their fans who sang in harmonies. Crimson City, whose bright red shirts were so famous that you could find them hanging from balconies in little towns that had never seen their stadium. Crimson City, whose rivalry with Riverlight was old and tangy as pickles. Some fans frowned. Some folded their arms. Some said with faces like shutters, "He's Riverlight. He is ours." Arush listened to every beat of it. He sat with Coach Lenz in the empty stands at Harbor Lane, where the wind made tiny sounds inside the flagpoles. "What does your heart say?" Coach asked. "My heart says I've lived a beautiful chapter," Arush said quietly. "It also says there's a new chapter waiting. I want to learn more. I want to grow. And I want people to see that a keeper can be a beginning, not just an end." Coach Lenz patted his knee. "Then go with love. Leave with gratitude. And when they sing for you or against you, listen to the music underneath. It will teach you." Crimson City Stadium was enormous, a red bowl that caught the sunlight and turned it into applause. When Arush walked out in his new kit, some fans booed. Not angrily, not like a storm, it was more like a cold wind tapping a window. He put a hand on his own chest. Thump. Steady drum. He smiled toward the sound without pretending it didn't exist. At his first press conference, he spoke with warmth. "I know the rivalry is strong," he said, voice as even as a horizon. "I respect it. Come here to work, to learn, to listen. If respect is a bridge, I hope I can help build it." The boos softened, then thinned, then turned into something else. Curiosity, perhaps, and then admiration, when the clean sheets began to stack like neat pages. Arush broke a long-held record for minutes without conceding a goal. It wasn't something he chased. It was something that arrived because he and his defense moved like a single organism, 11 hearts learning the same rhythm. Club's old legends visited training. "You play like you've always got a book open in your mind," one of them said. "And you turn the page at exactly the right time." More than trophies or records, it was the way Crimson City learned to breathe with him that made Arush's chest glow. He became their captain not because he shouted the loudest, but because he connected the most hearts. His style matured into something children would imitate in parks and gardens. He would step outside his penalty area, tap the ball aside, shape his body like a comma, a soft pause, then pass into space as if he were dropping a pebble into a pond and trusting the ripples. Commentators started calling it the lighthouse pass. Kids called it the magic sweep. Arush called it good timing. On warm afternoons, when the stadium hummed like a beehive and the sun found every red seat, he led Crimson City to trophies. Domestic titles arrived like spring flowers, first one, then a cluster, then entire fields. Continental triumphs came as careful harvests, the kind that only happen when seeds are planted in the right soil for many seasons. Then came the call to wear the nation's shirt, a jersey the color of mountain smoke and river stones. He became the country's first choice goalkeeper, a phrase that sounded too big for any single person. He remembered how Coach Lenz had told him to share weight by holding it lightly. He wore the armband sometimes, not like a crown but like a promise. At the World Crown, in a dance-loving country of bright drums and mango-colored sunsets, Arush tasted the most electric quiet he had ever known, the quiet that happens right before a decisive moment. In one match, as a striker streaked clear, Arush read the shape of the world a half-second earlier than most. He swept out softly, like moonlight stepping from behind a cloud, touched the ball aside, and carried it like a small bird in his glove before setting it down and passing it to safety. He wasn't merely keeping goal, he was starting stories. They won the tournament and fireworks drew flowers in the sky. Arush lifted the trophy with both hands and felt not taller but wider, like his heart had grown another room. The country celebrated gently, joy rippling from city squares to small kitchens. In Riverlight, children raised their tea glasses toward the television. Crimson City, old banners found new meaning. Some fans who had once booed now drew stars beside his name in their notebooks. Arush, for his part, went home and watered the little plant by his window. Then he wrote thank you letters to the coaches who had taught him to tie his laces, to the defenders who had trusted his voice, to the bus drivers who had waited late when interviews ran long. He continued on, season after season, learning to ride the waves of celebration and the slower tides of quiet work. One winter, after a long tournament, he took a break in the mountains. Snow fell like sugar through a sieve. He strapped on skis and smiled at the sky that had once lived on his gloves. On a gentle slope, a small misstep. A tumble. The snow was soft, but his leg felt odd, the way a well-read book sometimes slips from your lap and lies open on a page that you weren't ready to read. The doctors were kind. The air smelled like antiseptic and orange peels. You will heal, they said, hands warm and sure. But you will need patience, the kind that rolls in like fog and clears slowly. Patience arrived with morning birds. Arush sat by the window, crutches leaning against the sill like tall, polite guests. He learned the textures of time, how morning light moves across a wall, how tea tastes different at dawn and at dusk, how a city breathes when you stand still long enough to hear it. He did his exercises, tiny precise movements that knit muscle to bone like thread through cloth. When he couldn't run, he read to children at the hospital. When he couldn't kick, he practiced breathing with a music teacher who showed him how sound sits on the inside of silence. Sanaa visited, bringing stories and laughter. Coach Lenz called and listened while Arush described the meadow of his days. Crimson City's captaincy armband rested in a drawer, waiting patiently like a toy that knows it will be loved again. Spring and then summer. The day came when he laced his boots and tied them so carefully it felt like braiding the mane of a beloved horse. He walked out to train in the gentle gold of evening. The first pass off his instep was a quiet hello. The second was a conversation. By the third, he was telling a story again, one taken up joyfully by the feet around him. His return to the field wasn't a blast of trumpets. It was a smile that widened across a stadium seat by seat. Children waved, their eyes bright. Teammates nodded at him the way you nod at a friend who kept a promise. And when a dangerous ball rolled through space, Arush was there, exactly when and where he needed to be. Calm touch, tidy pass, breath like tide, heart like home. Years later, on a late summer afternoon painted with long shadows and figs ripening on windowsills, Arush stood under the flag of his country and made a decision. He had given his nation his best seasons, his sharpest eyes, his most careful passes. Across the training ground, he watched a young goalkeeper, Lena, diving with joy, footwork quick, shoulders open as a sunrise. It was time to open the door wider. In a press room filled with microphones that gleamed like little beetles, he spoke. "I am stepping back from the national team," he said, voice tranquil. "With gratitude and a full heart. There is a bright next chapter for our country, and I will cheer for it with both hands." People clapped, some with wet eyes. He hugged the coaches, signed a ball for a shy ball kid, and then walked out into a soft rain. The drops tapped the pavement like tiny dancers. He lifted his head to the sky and felt the coolness on his cheeks. Crimson City, he kept playing with the measured joy of someone who knows the exact weight of the thing he loves. He mentored Lena during national camps, stood at Riverlight's youth field and showed small keepers how to catch with quiet hands. He built a program with Coach Lenz that brought children from all over town to Harbor Lane on Sundays. Some wore boots a size too big. Some brought shoes with their toes peeking out like little explorers. Everyone brought their hearts. "Listen before you speak," he told them. "Look before you leap. Run to meet the moment with kindness." He set up a line of cones and asked the kids to pretend they were evening stars. "Now," he said, "we will dance through the night sky." He taught them to pass the ball into space, not into fear. He taught them that a leader is someone who shares, not someone who stands on a chair. Sometimes at the end of sessions he would take off his gloves, then he shake rain from his hair. "Close your eyes," he would say. "Listen. What do you hear?" They heard the tick of a bicycle wheel, the whisper of the grass, the long breath of the stadium sleeping. He smiled. "That's the field telling you its stories. If you listen, it will always guide you." Awards kept coming, as they do for people who serve a craft with devotion. But Arush didn't stack them on a shelf like stones. He let them live in the world. A scholarship launched for a kid who drew a stadium in chalk on a sidewalk, a library that bought more books than it had room for, a small, sunlit room in a hospital where anxious hearts could sit and breathe. One evening, as the day slipped into a pocket of blue, Arush walked to Riverlight Park alone. He wore a hoodie pulled tight against a playful wind. The floodlights were off, but the moon was generous. He stood under the old laundry line, still sagging a little, and smiled at the clothespins, 3 of them stubborn and faithful. He set a ball on the grass and stood at the edge of shadow and silver. He took 3 steps back, 3 forward, and let the hush of night wrap around him. Then he passed the ball against the gentle slope of the ground and received it. He did this again and again, until the pass and the breath and the distant song of the world were all the same note. Mahir and Nia arrived out of nowhere, like characters walking back into a story. They were older now, hair flecked with experience. Sana joined too, her braids shorter, her laugh the same. They didn't speak at first. They just formed shapes on the grass and moved the ball among themselves, a triangle of trust. You still look up, Sana said quietly. Always, Arush replied. They sat on the bench and shared a thermos of tea. The air smelled like wet wood and something sweet from a bakery across the lane. A cat tiptoed by, tail question marked against the night. Do you ever wish you'd stayed? Mahir asked, eyes on the moon. I do, Arush admitted, because truth is another kind of love. And I'm glad I went. I learned that love isn't smaller when it's shared. Riverlight shaped my feet. Crimson City taught me to use them for more people. Country taught me to listen for the sound of a whole crowd breathing. And the mountains taught me to slow down. Nia rested her head on the back of the bench. You changed the way kids play. They changed me first, he said. A few days later, Crimson City played a home match under skies so blue they looked freshly washed. In the 89th minute, the opponent's striker slipped behind the defense, the stadium sucking in a single long breath. Arush stepped forward, not hurried, not afraid, reading the pages of the moment as if the words had been printed there for him. He swept the ball aside with a simple, tender touch. Then, instead of clearing wildly, he looked up and found a teammate's run. Pass slid along the grass like a thin stream finding its level. 2 touches later, Crimson City scored. The stadium bloomed. After the final whistle, a boy wearing a not quite fitting jersey stood by the tunnel, holding a cardboard sign, "Your passes give me courage." Arush touched the sign with one finger, nodded to the boy, and then held his hand to his own heart, a little lighthouse's beam moving from him to the child and back again. Night tucked itself around the city. In his small kitchen, Arush washed apples and set 2 on a plate for breakfast. He sat at the table and wrote in a notebook. Page was cream-colored and quiet. He wrote, on the day I learned to sweep the ball, I also learned to sweep my doubts. On the day I stepped out of my box, I also stepped into myself. On the day I fell, I learned how to stand softly. He closed the notebook and stood at the window. The moon hung there like a friendly coach, trusting him without speaking. He thought of every child at Riverlight Park counting their steps, of every teammate who had listened, of every person who had once booed and then chosen to turn that sound into a song. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Thanks for believing in me," it read. He typed, "Thank you for believing in yourself." Then he lay down, the room holding his breath for him, the night closing its hands around the city like a gentle keeper. As you settle into your own bed, imagine Arusha's sky blue gloves folded on a chair, their silver thread catching the faintest light. Imagine the grass whispering that it is ready tomorrow for whatever dreams your feet will bring. Imagine the ball, round as the moon, promising to roll wherever your courage asks it to go. And if you ever stand in a place where it seems you must only wait, remember this: you are allowed to look up. You are allowed to step forward to meet the moment with kindness. You are allowed to be a lighthouse, shining, guiding, steady on whatever field your life has given you. Moral: be brave enough to be yourself, gentle enough to lead with kindness, and patient enough to grow through every season. The world needs the way only you can keep it safe and help it play. Sleep easy. The night team has you covered.